So in this video, we're talking about the Romans' first encounter with their greatest enemy in the West, Carthage. First, a quick timeline. The Romans had three major wars with the Carthaginians. The first two were prolonged, difficult, and traumatic for the Romans in very different ways. The third was a sort of coda in which the already defeated Carthage was finally destroyed. Why Carthage? As we saw in an earlier video, the Phoenicians had established a vibrant and extensive trade network throughout the Mediterranean, establishing outposts at key locations, some of which, like Carthage and the North African coast opposite Sicily, developed into thriving trading centers themselves. Carthage was ideally suited as the site for a maritime trading power, for two reasons. First, there are two excellent harbors, ideal both for shipbuilding and for a bustling commercial port. Second, Carthage was positioned at the place where the passage of the Mediterranean narrows between Africa and Sicily, the ideal spot to command a trade in the Western Med and passage of ships between the East and West. These were advantages that Rome did not have in its ambition to become a trading power itself. Its port at Ostia was both distant from Rome and inferior, and Rome's position on the Tyrrhenian coast of Italy was excellent for trading up and down the peninsula, but didn't help them as much with the Western Mediterranean, much less the East. Compounding this was the fact that the Carthaginians were well established, founded centuries before Rome, in the period in which the Phoenicians are flourishing in the early Iron Age. And we've already established the kind of compensatory inferiority complex the early Romans had toward older, wealthier, and more advanced societies, like the Etruscans, the Greeks, and the Phoenicians. Most significantly of all, the Carthaginians were born sailors and established a powerful seagoing trade network in emulation of their Phoenician ancestors, and had great expertise in both shipbuilding and navigation at sea. The Romans, on the other hand, were reluctant seagoers, even for trade or travel, much less war. They didn't seem to trust Neptune, who was not a god of Rome like Jupiter and Mars, and they traveled by sea only if they had to. In all ways, then, the Romans were ill-prepared to run up against the older, stronger, seagoing might of Carthage. Nonetheless, Roman assertion of control over southern Italy after the Samnite and Pyrrhic Wars made the conflict almost inevitable. As Rome was expanding outward from central Italy, so too was Carthaginian interest expanding, and both powers had their eyes on Sicily, home to acres and acres of extremely fertile land, and therefore capable of feeding a growing empire like Rome or Carthage. Sicily also boasted not only agricultural wealth, but lavishly wealthy Greek cities, most notably Syracuse on the eastern shore. Sicily lay between the expanding Roman dominion and Carthage's growing power, and it was Sicily that provided the pretext for the First Punic War, the Roman name for their conflicts with the Poeni, or Phoenicians, of Carthage. Once war with Carthage was a fact, it was clear that Rome would have to find a way to fight this great naval power on the sea, despite Roman expertise in war being entirely on land. The Romans had a few trading boats, but nothing that could be used in war. Fortunately, a beached and abandoned Carthaginian warship, a trireme, so named for its three banks of oars that make it fast and versatile in the water, fell into Roman hands, and Rome set its best carpenters and engineers at work on reverse engineering the construction of a trireme from their captured specimen. From this, Rome was able to develop its own version of the trireme warship. Like all triremes, it was fast and nimble, able to turn quickly or gain speed for smashing into an enemy ship with its forward ram. But the Romans wanted to take the enemy ships, to add to their fleet, not destroy them. So the Roman trireme had an additional innovation, the corvus, or raven, a rotating spiked gangplank that could be used to board an enemy ship. This also allowed the Romans to bring soldiers with them as well as sailors, who would then be able to fight in a way that the Romans understood, with sword, spear, and shield. The transition to naval power was not an easy one for the Romans, who never got over their dislike of the sea. At the outset, they also had no experience with naval warfare and made many mistakes. Ahead of the naval battle of Drepna, for example, the consul of the year, Publius Claudius Pulcher, acting as admiral of the new Roman fleet, needed to consult the gods. There were many ways of taking auguries on the fly out in the field. One of these involved having with the legion a set of chickens sacred to Juno, who, if they were feeding well, signaled the approval of the gods. Pulcher had brought the sacred chickens with him for this campaign, and on the morning of the battle was distressed to see that the chickens were seasick and would not feed. Pulcher, we are told, flew into a rage and tossed the sacred chickens overboard. In one version, he is said to have roared, "If they will not eat, let them drink." He then sailed into battle and was utterly defeated by the Carthaginians, his fleet almost completely destroyed or disabled. Pulcher was accused of religious treason for sailing into battle against negative auspices. Nonetheless, despite this steep learning curve, Rome gained a mastery of the seas in a fairly short time and defeated its maritime enemy, Carthage, to the surprise of everyone, not least perhaps the Romans themselves. Though in some ways the First Punic War seems like a precursor in retrospect to the grander conflict to come, the First Punic War had significant and lasting impact of its own. First, Rome had outpaced its own destruction once again through adaptation. Just as the Second Samnite War in the previous century had forced Rome to reinvent warfare on land in order to survive, so in the First Punic War the Romans made sea power their own in order to prevent defeat by Carthage. Rome, moreover, now ranked as an international power on par with Carthage, making Rome and Carthage direct and equal rivals for control over the trade of the Western Mediterranean, and thus setting the stage for the Second Punic War. The terms of the peace after the First Punic War, involving heavy tribute and hostages, also lay the groundwork for the coming war, with the noble families of Carthage, in particular the Barca family, which supplied many of its leaders and generals, determined that the Roman threat to Carthaginian peace must be ended. Children of the Carthaginian noble households grew up with the knowledge that theirs was the responsibility to wipe Rome off the map once and for all. One other completely unexpected and incomparably critical consequence resulted from the First Punic War: the province. Part of the spoils of victory was control over two new external territories, Sicily and Sardinia and Corsica together. So far, Roman control of Italy was exerted through the local magistrates of Municipia, Coloni, and Latin Rite cities, and the allies, Sacii, all of whom had an ongoing relationship with Rome, arranged by charter or treaty, and overseen by the Roman Senate. Sicily and Sardinia, however, were external territories, foreign conquered lands that would have to be governed remotely. There was no provision for this in the Roman Republican government, which we should always remember was no more than the city-state government of the actual city of Rome. As an ad hoc measure, the Romans ended up extending, or proroguing is the technical term, the imperium of a praetor who was leaving office, and gave him the portfolio, or in Latin provincia, of managing the territory of Sicily for the next year. A magistrate whose imperium was prorogued for another year beyond his actual magistracy was called a promagistrate. These could be either proconsuls or propraetors. Rome had made a few of these before, here and there, but here begins the practice of using proconsuls and propraetors with the assignment, or province, of being governors of a Roman-conquered territory. As we'll see later, there are problems with this reliance on proconsuls and propraetors as governors. When a consul becomes a proconsul, he retains his power to compel citizens, but he's no longer constrained by all the precedents and rules that go with being a consul, because he's passed out of that office and is now an ex-consul with the power of imperium. As governor, he also has no colleague to stand in the way of his ambition. While the original plan was to leave them in place for only 1 year, that became more difficult once there were more provinces than outgoing magistrates each year. And each of these ex-magistrates was sent to the provinces far from the eyes of the people of Rome with no support, no staff, no civil servants, no one but himself and his own household, slaves and freedmen, and the local Roman legion, whom he had the power to command via imperium. Meanwhile, the wealthy local nobles were eager to ensure the easy governance by Rome via favors and bribes. Thus, the provincial governor was one man with imperium, with no staff, wealthy locals, and often an army at his disposal, left in place sometimes for multiple years to potentially build a power base. Essentially, this was the most unrepublican form of government of provinces the Roman Republic could have ever accidentally devised, the consequences of which Rome would be feeling for centuries to come. And of course, this is a theme we'll be coming back to in future weeks. For now, that's that.